Jim, so far when you hear about what could be a suicide, looks to be a suicide bomber because of what's left of his body, and the fact that there's nails and shrapnel, what are you thinking?
Well, we know who it was. You know, it was Islamists. President Trump called them out in Riyadh. He called them out again this morning from Israel. And I think what we need to do is look for action from the states that have been causing a lot of the problems. You know, he was standing next to Mahmoud Abbas, and Brian mentioned earlier, the Palestinians pay the families of suicide bombers for the rest of their lives for the damage, for the terrorism they've done against Israelis. If the Palestinians want peace, they need to stop that immediately. So I think there were calls to the Palestinians and to other Muslim leaders to join us in driving extremism out. Well, that starts at home, and some of those leaders need to be the ones stopping their support for terrorism.
Jim, is it telling, because they haven't released the individual's name that's responsible for this, is it telling that they are looking at maybe a group and there's more than one person involved? Because we don't have many more details when it comes to the identity of who this person is.
You know, I hope so. That would be fantastic if that's the reason. I believe they do know who it is, so the fact that they haven't released it, the British are generally a little slow about that, just to be deliberate. What I would like to hear is for Prime Minister May to come out and say, I have authorized our security forces to round up the 100 or 1,000 top people on their watch lists, because they have people they've already identified as extremists. They should grab every one of them, bring them in for some serious questioning, and try to see if they're connected to this, or if they can find out they might be connected to something coming down the pike.
It couldn't be too tough to figure out who could be the bomb maker in Manchester, England. You wouldn't think, although the EU, it's easy to travel betwixt the countries, because the level of sophistication of this kind of bomb is much different than just some guy with a knife.
Yeah, I mean, it takes the ability to build some sort of improvised device or potentially to smuggle one in. I mean, the smuggling routes in and out of Europe are pretty serious, so I think they could have brought it in that way. It could have been made locally. But the bottom line is somebody did it. That somebody is connected to other somebodies. Yeah. And terrorism expert Patrick Poole coined the term known wolves, not lone wolves. These people are known to law enforcement, and all too often they're left to their own devices until something happens. Then we try and pick up the pieces. They need to get proactive, scarf these people up, shake them down, and try to stop the next attack.
Indeed.
All right, Jim Hansen, served in the U.S. Army Special Forces. Thank you for your service, Jim. Right. Thanks for joining us.
And Jim will be back with you, too, next hour. Meanwhile,
coming up, the Manchester explosion so powerful it even shook the walls, sparking panic as you've seen throughout the building. Watch.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, what can the explosives and the aftermath tell us about the potential terror ties? We have a forensic expert here with the clues and so much more as we look at the carnage and the president as he travels overseas in just a moment.
Oh my God. What just happened? What's going on? Oh my God!
It's a Fox News alert. At least 22 people are dead, including children, and dozens more were injured at that Ariana Grande concert in Manchester in the UK.
Police have confirmed a suicide bomber detonated apparently in a device and then died at the scene.
All right, so what evidence are investigators examining as we speak, and what does it tell us about the terrorist? Here to weigh in is forensics expert Jennifer Barringer. Jennifer, if you were there right now, what would be the first thing you would do?
The most important thing is for them to figure out who this bomber is. They need to find out if he's just the person who brought it there or if he's actually the bomb maker.
How do they do that?
Well, unfortunately, they're going to be looking for pieces of his body along with, sometimes they might actually have a wallet with an ID in it, and you can get a piece of it, there. But if they can't find something like that, they're looking for pieces of the body. They're going to do DNA testing, and as soon as they can, they'll go directly to his home.
And they'll be able to match maybe some of the video, because they have cameras everywhere, even in a crowd of 18,000, and maybe see, okay, this guy's wearing a backpack, this guy could be wearing a vest. This is the clothing he was wearing, right?
Exactly. And apparently they have an idea of who it is. So it's likely, as you said, that they have a tape of him. They might recognize him. And they just need to find out where he lived, because it's very important that they go to his home, find out if there are bomb-making parts there. If not, that means automatically there's more than one person involved.
Sure. This is the worst terror attack, and of course we suppose it is terror, since 2005, where they attacked the buses in England.
Right.
Of course, those bombs, they had a petroleum smell to them. These bombs, they perfected it where you can't really tell what's in the backpack, haven't they?
That's true. This type of bomb likely is a TATP bomb, which doesn't matter what it stands for, but the bottom line is we can't detect it. We haven't perfected a way to detect it, and it's very unstable. In fact, a hard tap will likely explode it. So unless you're a suicide bomber, it's unlikely that you're going to want to be carrying that around.
Jennifer, to explain why they would use a bomb, a nail bomb, is it cheaper to make? Is it easier to make?
It wouldn't be easier, but it will certainly create a lot more damage and kill a lot more people.
Well, let me ask you something. Do you think one person could do something like that?
One person could do something like this. The question is, he's obviously a terrorist. The question is whether he's involved with a terrorist group.
Would I need training to do it, or could I learn it on YouTube?
You can learn it on YouTube.
How about from a female perspective? I mean, you hear the moms screaming in the background, taking their children there. We had one guest on earlier. I was reading his pre-interview, and he was saying in the pre-interview that this is not, we think of this as oh my gosh, this is a new low, and now they're targeting children. He was saying, no, this has been going on. Look at Boko Haram, the little girls in Africa. But it hits home because it's Ariana Grande.
That's
we can
right.
imagine taking our girls to a concert like this.
Absolutely.
Girls from Florida, 23 years old.
That's true.
Oh my goodness. So let me ask you this: when you see something like this, 10:30 at night on a Monday night, as people are leaving this great big happy party with Ariana Grande, a lot of them going over to the subway to ride home. What does it say about the timing?
He cruelly waited until the show was over, and either he didn't have a ticket or he just wanted to get as many people as possible, and he was able to do it outside. Of course, if he'd gone in any earlier, he would have affected a lot less people.
Well, I would hope that, as is the case here in the United States, at a big venue like that, if he had a ticket, there would be somebody stopping him at the turnstile saying, let me look inside your backpack.
Oh, I'm sure that's true, and I know that they had a lot of security, but the TAT bombs, you don't need much. Very little will do it, and like I said, just a hard slap could explode it.
Does not set off metal detectors. Is there metal in it?
Well, there was, because he put a lot of nuts and bolts in it. That's right. So if he had planned to go in, he likely would have left that out.
And so now do they go and pick up the nuts and the bolts, and they try to figure out what hardware store they were purchased at?
They easily could do that, in fact.
Do nails have a signature?
Not that I know of, but some may.
Yeah.
All right, Jennifer Behringer, forensic expert. Thank you so much, Jennifer. For
By the way,
being on with us.
the second bomb, which was not a bomb, it was a controlled
Suspicious
detonation,
device.
though. They said it was just abandoned clothing.
Yeah.
So,
Better safe than sorry. All right, coming up on this Tuesday morning, more on the horrific terror attack in Manchester, England. We're live on the ground with the very latest. Plus, our next guest saw the attack coming and says it's designed to send a message to America. That warning, next.
all right, back with the Fox News alert. At least 22 people, including children, are dead after a terrorist attack targets a packed Ariana Grande concert last night.
Horrifying screams, as you can hear, filling the air at that arena in Manchester in the UK. 21,000 terrified fans leaping over chairs and barriers, running down those stairs, just trying to escape.
I don't blame them. Greg Palcott live in Manchester this morning with breaking details of this hour. Greg?
Hi, folks. Yeah, we are in a city that is on lockdown, the central part of it anyway. I'll step away and let my cameraman Pierre show you a bit of the huge police presence here. Behind them is this canopied building that is the Victoria train station, and connected to the Victoria train station is the Manchester Arena. And it appears that the person who seems to be the suicide bomber, the attacker in this terrible incident, did his bad work in the foyer area near the box office area, setting off a bomb, perhaps with screws and nuts and bolts attached to it, the ugliest kind of suicide bomb, and that left 22 people killed, 59 people injured, and a lot of young people attending this Ariana Grande concert, 21,000-seat sold-out performance. The performance had just finished. All of this was well-timed as the people, young people, a lot of young women, along with their parents to some extent, filing out of this scene when the blast happened. We do have one identification, the first identification of one of the fatalities, and yes, it is a young woman, and we're going to be hearing more and more about these kinds of sad casualties. Just a couple blocks from where we are, we passed a hotel where it is believed dozens of families are waiting to hear of their loved ones. There are missing individuals from this concert last night as the police do some very serious forensic work. The theory is that this person acted alone, but what the police are looking at right now, aside from combing the arena for any other details, any other clues as to where he came from and what he was all about, is that they're looking for any kind of a support network who was working with him to make this a well-calibrated attack happen. ISIS has claimed responsibility, or at least praised the incident online, but no direct connections with the group has yet been found. In London, a group called the Cobra Group, that is the high-level anti-terror group headed by Prime Minister May, now meeting, looking to see what they can do about this incident, the worst terror incident to hit the UK in 12 years, and the similar kind of incident that we've been watching all across Europe for the past couple of years. Back to you guys.
But it also has been France, too. What about the fact that you got 400 ISIS-trained fighters going back to England because they're being blown out of the Middle East? That has got to concern security people.
Absolutely big concern, Brian. The homegrown terrorist concern, the terrorists who've been trained on the battlefield, and it is a battlefield both over in Syria and Iraq, and as that fight dies down to some extent, yes, they're returning here to the UK and to other countries, and the skills that they have acquired there, they could be applying here. Again, the suicide attack, we have seen it. We have witnessed the aftermath of it personally in places like Paris, where you remember another concert venue was attacked to even worse results. So again, Manchester police looking very hard at the aftermath of what is happening here as we look at the police conferring to the local population, trying to understand this horror right in their neighborhood. Guys.
Right. It's hard to understand that. All right, Greg Palcott live in Manchester. We understand that the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Theresa May, is currently convening a counterterrorism meeting at 10 Downing Street, and apparently later today she is expected to go to Manchester herself. We are expecting a press event for her to come out those doors and tell us what she knows very shortly.
Obviously suspending campaigns because of this immediately.
The campaign was the election was supposed to be on June 8th, and they are suspending that. A new date has not been released. Greg did mention that the first person has been identified. We do have a picture of this young 18-year-old lady, Georgina Bethany Callender. She was only 18 years old. She is the first teenage victim to be identified. And
she apparently a very big Ariana Grande fan. Here she is 2 years earlier with Ariana Grande herself. Wow. So she is the first victim identified in what looks like a terror strike in Manchester.
Usually always when we are given the names, that means the family already knows. The family has been told by authorities, so keep them in your prayers.
And that's what the victims look like, and you're horrified, and yet ISIS is cheering, even though they have not officially taken responsibility, which brings us into Aaron Cohen. He's a former member of the Israeli Defense Forces Special Operations Counterterror Unit and founder of Cherries, a leading manufacturer of law enforcement products for terrorism readiness. Aaron, are you ever ready for something like this to happen? Are you one of the few people around who's not surprised when horror hits the middle of a major city like this?
I don't think anybody's really surprised anymore, are they? I mean, we're at a time now where We're passing 15 years after 9/11. We still have terrorism. It's unfolding. A battlefield is unfolding in Europe right now. And the questions we need to be asking ourselves are we doing everything that we can to prevent these attacks from happening? And if I could correlate that to just some of the last person you were speaking with, your last guest, this was a planned attack. I almost think that it's irrelevant whether or not this person has a connection with a larger terror network, and I'll tell you why. The bomb is able to be learned how to be made on YouTube, and you know, with some sit down and some common sense, this guy was able to put together the best time to carry out this attack. And from what I understand, this was at the end of the concert. So regardless of how good the security was, and we've seen concerts, we've all been there, regardless of how good the security is leading into the actual venue, it typically tends to soften when you're leaving. Sure. The tube is lined up right where everybody was exiting, and that was a perfect target of opportunity. How we deal with that in Israel, it's the same way in terms of how we think. This guy sits down trying to figure out the best way to do it. We try and use an intuitive, common sense approach, which President Trump is learning firsthand as he visits Israel. How we deal with that, which is, and this term has become cliche, but we apply a multi-layer approach, which means it would take a multi-failure event for a terrorist to reach a target like a major concert venue. And that means every layer would have to fail. So how do we apply that? It means that we have to push crowds out. It means that wherever there's crowds of people congregating, we need to keep them moving. We don't let those crowds form. We make sure that we've got plenty of armed uniformed presence and even twice as many undercover presence. And those are the real guys doing the security. And we make sure that nobody can get within those crowds. And I think that was the failure in this system right here. And you guys, everybody's jumping on the investigation. We got to figure out, why don't we just start figuring out how to protect these things?
Like tonight.
That's where I come out
There's
from my
concerts
experience
tonight.
in Israel.
There's concerts tonight in America. There's concerts throughout Europe, even though her world tour is suspended temporarily, I hope, and I can understand it. How do you react in your business today?
Well, what we do is we go get the experts, find guys like me or 100 other experts in Israel who've protected Ben Gurion for 20 years and El Al flights and get the behavioral-based programs in place. You got to beef up the private security. You got to get them armed, and you got to have a lot of. You have to throw money. Here's the most important thing: you got to throw up. The biggest difference between the way we do business with security in Israel and everywhere else in the world, we spend money on the training. The brain is the most important security tool. The camera can't react. The metal detector may or may not react, but it can't fire back. The brain is the only mechanism that can look at something and get an intuitive and dermal reaction on the hairs raised on the back of your neck and go, you know what, that's somebody I need to speak to a little bit longer. Obviously, we want to be looking for Islamists. There's a certain Middle Eastern profile we're looking for. People can't stand the term. We don't care. At the end of the day, we have to protect our people in Israel. It's the same thing here, but the money we spend is in the training, whether it's the 25 shekel an hour security guard. He's still going through 40 hours of training to learn how to spot those indicators and question people. And I think that's just what's got to happen here. We have to start putting that money into that security apparatus.
Aaron, you would probably agree that the level of sophistication of the Manchester police probably not at the same level of the London police. And then you've got the fact that it's Ariana Grande, which is an American act. They're performing before 20,000 screaming kids in a country of our allies. That makes it a target right there, doesn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. Ariana Grande, American artist, performing in a country with one of our #1 allies who's been with us since day one after 9/11, both Iraq and Afghanistan, if I'm not mistaken. This is a double target of opportunity. The fact that it was in Manchester, I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't as beefed up as London. London's seen a lot more terror than the middle or northern parts of England. And so absolutely a target of opportunity. And you know, again, with terrorism, the same way the terrorist went, okay, I'm going to get to that crowd at the end of the event, security professionals around the world need to sit down and go, let's do the same thing backwards. Where are they going to strike? When are we going to stop reacting to this thing? And I know, again, it's cliche. We have to start pre-acting, not a real word, I just made it up, and then begin to lay down these layers for crowded events and crowded situations where there's lots of people.
I think that'll be in Webster's dictionary by next year. Thanks, Aaron Cohen. Appreciate it.
I think
Thanks,
it
guys.
goes on to be even stronger than that, though, too. I mean, it's about cutting ISIS's head off. It's about eradicating them, like our president has said, before they even get to the concerts.
But as you push them out of the Middle East and Syria, they've got to go somewhere, and a lot of them going back home. Meanwhile, President Trump already talking tough against the terrorists behind the Manchester attack. So why is that important? Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer here with why he's saying what he's saying, where he's saying it.
So many young, beautiful, innocent people living and enjoying their lives murdered by evil losers in life. I won't call them monsters because they would like that term. They would think that's a great name.
Overnight, President Trump already talking tough about the terror in Manchester, England. And our next guest says last night's attack has all the hallmarks of ISIS.
And here to weigh in is former senior CIA intelligence officer and Army veteran Tony Shaffer. Good morning, Tony. Thanks for being with us.
Sure, thanks for having me.
What was your reaction to the president's speech and when you saw these images of what happened at the Ariana Grande concert?
First, this was well-timed. This was symbolic. This was both against a target of the Americans, of us, because this was in England, and frankly, because of the president's trip, that they wanted to make a statement. And more importantly, this was a mass casualty attack. Military-grade explosives. I think we're going to come to find this vest was probably smuggled in from Europe, and there was a network behind it. So these are all things of concern. To President Trump's comments, look, half measures have gotten us here. Either we accept that there's a war going on and we're going to do everything we can to go back at it as hard and as rapidly as we can, or just give up and go home. You know, I've seen Maria Harf on your own network here from the time she was at State Department talking about giving jobs to ISIS. Nonsense. It's time we get past this soft narrative of the idea that we can somehow just be a little nicer. These people are going to listen to us. It's not going to happen. This is an example of what complacency gets you. And we have to now look at what happened here, how to go about, as your last guest said, getting ahead of them, figuring out where they're going, because ISIS is being defeated in the Middle East. They're going to spread out and go other places. So the president's comments were very clearly designed to say, look, these people need to be dealt with, and we have to deal with them very severely.
And Tony, you mentioned a moment ago that you thought there was a possibility that this particular strike was timed to the president's trip in the Middle East.
Absolutely. Yes, Steve.
Why?
I do believe. Look, the president is out right now trying to create the circumstance and conditions for a larger alliance in the Middle East. We've talked about this here on the show, an Arab NATO, if you will, finding a way to bring the Arab nations, the Sunni nations together to focus on this common threat. The common issue right now is ISIS and Al-Qaeda, those two terror groups. So I think what we're seeing here is ISIS pushing back, trying to say, we don't care. Well, if they don't care, that's fine. What we have to then understand is that we must then do those hard things that we've not done over the past 16 years. Just remember, this war against radical Islam has gone on for 16 years. And I'm sorry, I think the president was badly served by his staff by them not permitting him to say radical Islam in Riyadh. And I'm sorry, H.R. McMaster and all those folks are giving the president options, which, again, are only half measures. Either we're in it to win it, or we need to go home.
Wow, so you're disappointed in those comments. Interesting, or the lack thereof. Lieutenant Colonel, thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tony.
Targeting innocent children, now a terror strategy to strike fear all around the world. James Mitchell waterboarded some of the worst jihadis at Gitmo, and he takes us inside the mind of a terrorist next.
News alert now, a suicide bomber kills at least 22 people, including children, and hurt dozens more. They were targeted at the Ariana Grande concert in the United Kingdom, in Manchester to be specific. And our next guest has heard terrorists explain firsthand why killing kids is just part of the jihadi cause. He'll explain it. He can't understand it. Dr. James Mitchell joins us. He developed the CIA's Enhanced Interrogation Program and is author of Enhanced Interrogation. So, Dr. Mitchell, always great to see you. So when people say, oh, they didn't, they're targeting kids, how horrific. How do they justify How did, for example, did Khalid Sheikh Mohammed justify killing children?
Well, one of the things that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the mastermind behind 9/11, and the other senior terrorists that I questioned in CIA custody made clear to me is that there are no innocent bystanders, that it's perfectly permissible from the fatwas that they've received to target children for lots of reasons. One reason is that parents pay taxes that support the resistance to the spread of Islamic domination around the world. Another reason, he told me, was that if you leave the children of the infidels alive, all that does is restock the ranks of your enemies, right? And then finally, if you can kill enough children, it will frighten the parents who are likely to resist enough that they will withdraw and just simply not want to get involved in that.
So I was listening to one terror expert on another channel say, this is so horrific, potential terrorists might even be repelled by this. Do you agree with that mindset?
No, they're looking at it with Western eyes. We see young people celebrating life and enjoying being together. What an Islamist sees is a provocative young woman, scantily clad or provocatively clad, undulating on stage, titillating men and girls and boys who should not even be together. They see that as an obscenity, where we see it as a celebration of life. So it's a perfectly reasonable target, particularly if it has the side effect of horrifying the parents of the kids who are killed.
And one of the differences, this is now too common in major cities in the West, and the 5th major attack this year alone. Thanks so much, Dr. Mitchell, to trying to make sense of this horror. Appreciate it.
No, you're welcome. Thanks.
Straight ahead, more on our top story, the horrific terror attack at the Met and the concert in Manchester, and President Trump in Jerusalem, expecting to visit Israel's Holocaust Memorial. That's live.
Ariana Grande concert.
Horrifying screams, as you can hear, filling the air in Manchester in the UK in that arena as 21,000 terrified fans are trying to get out of there alive. They're leaping over chairs and barriers, just trying to escape.
Oh my gosh. Coming up? What is happening? What's going on? Oh my god!
All right, police are calling it a terror attack, saying the cold-blooded killers blew himself up with a nail bomb near an exit. He had nuts and bolts flying everywhere, according to eyewitnesses, striking mostly teenagers and some parents as they were leaving and meeting their kids at the concert, at the end of the concert.
Authorities now investigating if this was a lone wolf massacre or if he was part of a larger network.
The first teenage victim of this explosion has just been identified as 18-year-old Georgina Bethany Callender. There she is in that picture. The Ariana Grande fan posting a picture taken just 2 years ago online before last night's concert, saying she was so excited to see her again.
There's something that's going on this morning on social media, and that is where, given the fact that there are so many children who have not reported home to their parents, their friends and family members are concerned, and so they're posting photo montages of many of the missing children on Twitter. And if you go on Twitter and Facebook this morning, you will see things like that right there.
For folks who don't have Twitter accounts, if you put in hashtag Manchester, then that brings up anyone who's put in that hashtag. So a lot of these young kids are looking for their friends that went to the concert, and they haven't been able to reach them. Now, many people are saying they saw cell phones just being dropped on the ground. People were trying to get out of there. So it might be people that just can't be identified because their cell phones are still inside the arena.
There was a local Holiday Inn where they said, go there and meet, and that's where your parents will meet you. And I'm sure now it's been hours since the attack. That was which we were all seeing in the coverage last night as it unfolded. And by the way, what an incredible job everybody did last night, especially Shepard. I was watching streaming as well as online.
You know, I was thinking about, what age do your kids get to when you drop them off at the arena and you say, you go in with your friends, meet me outside at this tree or whatever. So they're 15-year-olds that are trying to get out of their parents, and they might not have been able to find their parents and could just be wandering around. It's very scary.
Well, the terror threat in the UK is now listed at severe. That is its highest. Greg Palcott is right there. Greg, sadly, we've seen this before. In fact, there was an attack, not this horrific, but a couple of months ago, remember?
Exactly. We've seen it all across Europe. A concert, in fact, attacked in France to brutal effect. But here, also quite brutal. I'll set the scene for you here. Cameraman Pierre will show you some police here, the leading edge of a city of Manchester that is on absolute lockdown. That silver canopy building you see behind us, well, that is the Victoria train station. And it was the train station that is connected with the Manchester Arena. And in between those two buildings is the lobby where, according to police, the attacker did his deed. According to reports, a suicide attacker, possibly armed with nuts and bolts to do devastating harm, devastating effect in this area where he had public access to. But it was this area where those 21,000, mostly kids, were just coming out of that Ariana Grande.
We're interrupting you because the Prime Minister Theresa May is speaking now.
With victims and the families and friends of all those affected. It is now beyond doubt that the people of Manchester and of this country have fallen victim to a callous terrorist attack, an attack that targeted some of the youngest people in our society with cold calculation. This was among the worst terrorist incidents we have ever experienced in the United Kingdom. And although it is not the first time Manchester has suffered in this way, it is the worst attack the city has experienced and the worst ever to hit the north of England. The police and security services are working at speed to establish the complete picture, but I want to tell you what I can at this stage. At 10:33 last night, the police were called to reports of an explosion at Manchester Arena in Manchester city centre near Victoria train station. We now know that a single terrorist detonated his improvised explosive device near one of the exits of the venue, deliberately choosing the time and place to cause maximum carnage and to kill and injure indiscriminately. The explosion coincided with the conclusion of a pop concert, which was attended by many young families and groups of children. All acts of terrorism are cowardly attacks on innocent people, but this attack stands out for its appalling, sickening cowardice, deliberately targeting innocent, defenceless children and young people who should have been enjoying one of the most memorable nights of their lives. As things stand, I can tell you that, in addition to the attacker, 22 people have died and 59 people have been injured. Those who were injured are being treated in 8 different hospitals across Greater Manchester. Many are being treated for life-threatening conditions. And we know that among those killed and injured were many children and young people. We struggle to comprehend the warped and twisted mind that sees a room packed with young children not as a scene to cherish, but as an opportunity for carnage. But we can continue to resolve to thwart such attacks in future, to take on and defeat the ideology that often fuels this violence, and if there turn out to be others responsible for this attack, to seek them out and bring them to justice. The police and security services believe that the attack was carried out by one man, but they now need to know whether he was acting alone or as part of a wider group. It will take some time to establish these facts, and the investigation will continue. The police and security services will be given all the resources they need to complete that task. The police and security services believe they know the identity of the perpetrator, but at this stage of their investigations, we cannot confirm his name. The police and emergency services have, as always, acted with great courage, and on behalf of the country, I want to express our gratitude to them. They acted in accordance with the plans they had in place and the exercises they conduct to test those plans, and they performed with the utmost professionalism. 400 police officers were involved in the operation through the night, and many paramedics, doctors and nurses have worked valiantly amid traumatic and terrible scenes to save lives and care for the wounded. Significant resources have been deployed to the police investigation, and there continue to be visible patrols around Manchester, which include the deployment of armed officers. For people who live and work in Manchester, there remains a large cordon in place around Manchester Arena and Victoria Station, which will be in place for some time. The station is closed and will remain closed while a detailed forensic search is underway. We know that many friends and relatives of people caught up in the attack are still trying to find out what has happened to their children, brothers and sisters, parents and loved ones. So please, think of those people who are experiencing unimaginable worry, and if you have any information at all relating to the attack, please contact Greater Manchester Police. The threat level remains at severe. That means that a terrorist attack remains highly likely. But the Independent Joint Terrorism Analysis Centre, which sets the threat level on the basis of the intelligence available to them, will continue to assess this throughout today and in the days ahead. Later today, I will travel to Manchester to meet the Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police, Ian Hopkins, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, and members of the emergency services who have come to Manchester's aid in its moment of need. And as I announced last night, the general election campaign has been suspended. I will chair another meeting of COBRA later today. At terrible moments like these, it is customary for leaders, politicians and others to condemn the perpetrators and declare that the terrorists will not win. But the fact that we have been here before, and the fact that we need to say this again, does not make it any less true. For as so often while we experienced the worst of humanity in Manchester last night, we also saw the best. The cowardice of the attacker met the bravery of the emergency services and the people of Manchester. The attempt to divide us met countless acts of kindness that brought people closer together. And in the days ahead, those must be the things we remember. The images we hold in our minds should not be those of senseless slaughter, but of the ordinary men and women who put concerns about their own safety to one side and rushed to help. Of the men and women of the emergency services who worked tirelessly to bring comfort, to help, and to save lives. Of the messages of solidarity and hope of all those who opened their homes to the victims. For they are the images that embody the spirit of Manchester and the spirit of Britain, a spirit that through years of conflict and terrorism has never been broken and will never be broken. There will be difficult days ahead. We offer our thoughts and prayers to the family and friends of those affected. We offer our full support to the authorities, the emergency and the security services as they go about their work. And we all, every single one of us, stand with the people of Manchester at this terrible time. And today, let us remember those who died, and let us celebrate those who helped, safe in the knowledge that the terrorists will never win, and our values, our country and our way of life will always prevail.
There she goes back into 10 Downing Street, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Theresa May, calling it a terror attack that targeted children with cold calculation. One bit of news, therefore sure, she confirmed that apparently the bomber, the solo bomber, has been identified but not named at this point. You would imagine so that the police can go to his place and figure out what he was up to.
And who else might have been with him. And, of course, it's a bit of a risk when you say we think we know he is because that's the scatter rule. But I guess they get the idea that they should scatter if they had anything to do with making that bomb. But we did have a bomb expert on an hour ago who said you could conceivably learn this on YouTube and do it yourself.
All right. Well, earlier today, we saw the president in Bethlehem. Now we're looking at him live. He is back in the Jerusalem area. He's at Yad Vashem, which is the Holocaust Memorial, and will also have a speech at the Israel Museum.
That's right.
So that's a little of that. Earlier, and then of course you saw he's back with the Prime Minister, and this is live. But earlier today he was in the Palestinian territories in Bethlehem, and this is where he's going to end his visit.
He did have some comments about whoever did this in Manchester, and I think we have a soundbite. Let's play it. We will play it a little later on.
He did extend his deepest condolences to the families. He did say that these evildoers are losers. He will not call them monsters. He will call them losers, these terrorists that are doing this. And he said the wicked ideology needs to be obliterated.
What about that mindset of that wicked ideology? Why do some celebrate where most civilized people are horrified? Somebody who has to deal with the worst of the worst, the CIA operative himself, Mike Baker, back with us. Hey, Mike, do you understand the conflicting mindsets where they celebrate, where ISIS celebrates, and we're horrified?
No, look, I've been doing this a long time, overseas in operations against a variety of terrorists, and you never get to that point where you necessarily understand it. It's a level of depravity that we have a hard time. We're not wired to understand this. And I mean, look, just in terms of surveilling the target, the Manchester Arena, these people don't live in a bubble. And, you know, this individual, the attacker who they have identified, they didn't act on their own. So there was surveillance of the target. They understand who was going to be in that arena. They understand it was going to be children and young people. And then the attacker himself goes in before setting off the device, surrounded by children and young people. We don't understand that mindset. And so when you hear people talk about how we just have to hold hands and come together and negotiate, I've been doing this a long time, and that's not going to work. You can't go your way out of it, but again, it doesn't mean you can't make a good faith effort, while also doing the other things that you need to do on other levels of this problem to try to hopefully minimize the future of it.
Yeah, Mike, you touched a moment ago on what Theresa May, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, said a moment ago, and that was that they apparently had ID'd the bomber. Tell us what's going on behind the scenes, because obviously we don't know where it is. Otherwise, there'd be a Sky News reporter out in front of wherever they were. What are the police doing at this point?
Right. Well, yeah, I've contacts that I've talked to over there, and I've worked with MI5 and 6 and the Metropolitan Police over the years on various things, and the contacts I've talked to said that they have identified the attacker. They've been dealing with people who are close to the individual to gather information, that they've been identifying and targeting addresses. This thing has been moving very quickly, and in part it's a tribute to the fact that 5 and 6 and the Met and the Greater Manchester Police are very well experienced, unfortunately. I guess you could look at it that way. But what they're doing right now is, you know, there was the post-blast work, the forensic work, gathering all the information, the fragments, the component parts that might still be available from the device. There's the DNA.
Mike,
there's gathering witnesses. Yes.
Pardon the interruption. The President of the United States is putting down a race right now. Let's listen.